Hello, everybody. Welcome to this one-off chat, discussion, explanation, everything else from me. The reason I'm putting this out is there's been a lot going on recently, and I'm just very keen to just keep you guys in the loop, as it were, in terms of the things I'm doing and everything else as well. Now, one of the major things that I'm going to be doing in the next couple of weeks is on this coming Saturday. I'll be giving a talk at Bath University for ASAP, which is the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. I first did a talk for them around about 7 or 8 years ago now in Reading, and I really enjoyed my time there. And I'm going to be speaking around about midday. So if anybody wants to get there, I will post details of the event and how you can book tickets. It's going to be really good because there's going to be lots of other really interesting speakers there. I'm one of many. For instance, Professor Chris French will be speaking just before me, and also my good friend Dr. Jack Hunter will be speaking there as well. But one of the things, well, the reason that this talk is going to be quite different, the talk I'm doing at Bath University, is it's going to be about a specific area of my research. It's going to be about the JB Priestley letters. Now, some of you may be aware of these and some of you may not. So I'll just give you a little bit of background information. Around about 12 years ago, I was invited to speak at the National Theatre in London. And it was before a production of Time and the Conways, the JB Priestley play. And of course, JB Priestley, the famous British playwright. And the reason that they contacted me was because I'd written a book, The Labyrinth of Time. And on that, I touched upon some of Priestley's plays and also my own general interest in the philosophy and the science of time and time perception. And they invited me along and they said it would be really good if you could give a talk before a production. They do these things called platform events. And a platform event is before a production. The audience can come in early and they will have technical speakers about the play or various other bits of information. And we're on stage. And I was up there with Professor Jeff Forshaw. Jeff Forshaw is a very interesting guy. In fact, he was the PhD tutor for Brian Cox. Professor Brian Cox. And indeed, I met Jeff a few weeks before we did the event at Manchester University, where Jeff is based. And we had a fascinating discussion because we decided on how we were going to approach the issues involved. But one of the curious things then happened was that I found that there was going to be a production of When We Are Married, which is another JB Priestley play, not one of his time plays, so not a play I'm particularly interested in, but still a very intriguing piece of work. And I discovered that it was taking place, there was going to be a production of this at the Playhouse in Liverpool. And I was living on Wirral at the time, just the other side of the water from Liverpool. And I realized that from some of the advertising I saw that JB Priestley's son, Tom, was going to be speaking before the event. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. Maybe I should contact Tom about my talk down in London. So I contacted the theatre, and the theatre kindly put me in contact with Tom. And Tom and I agreed to meet for a coffee before he did his talk at the theatre. And we had a wonderful chat. Tom was a really nice guy. He was, I think he won an Oscar for the editing of the movie Deliverance, if you all remember Deliverance, Dueling Banjos, because he worked over in America, and he also did Barry Lyndon, I think, was another of the Stanley Kubrick movie that he was involved in as well. So he was quite well up in Hollywood and everything else as well. But we talked about his father. And he was interested to know a little bit about me and why I was doing the talk down in London. And I explained that I was a writer, and I explained the subject matter I was writing about or had written about. And he turned around and he said, you'd be very interested to know something, that my father, when he died in 1984, we found a load of letters underneath his bed in a suitcase. And the letters were around about 3,000 letters that had been sent to Priestley in 1963, I think I'm correct in saying, when he appeared on a TV program called Monitor with a guy called Hugh Weldon, which was an arts program, late on a Sunday night. And he was discussing his book that he was writing at the time called This. Man and Time. Oh, it's reversed, so you probably make that seem right up, but it's Man and Time. And Priestley, at the end of the discussion, Hugh Weldon turned to the TV audience and said, if anybody's had any anomalous experiences with time, please feel free to write in to Mr. Priestley, because he may include some of your letters in the books. These were the letters that Tom found. And Tom said, do you know, my father used somewhere in the region of around about 20 of those letters, of the 3,000 letters, and the rest of them are split up. Part of the collection is up at Bradford University, but the vast majority of the letters are up at the University of Cambridge Documents Library. Would you like to read them and have a look at them? And I said, yes, of course I would. And they were, although they're at the University Library at Cambridge, they're still technically owned by the Society for Psychical Research. So I managed to get clearance from the Society for Psychical Research to go up and read the books. Now, read the letters. Now, I know of only, I think, one other person at that stage that had even looked at the letters other than Priestley and his secretary. So I was really the first person to go through them, the vast majority of them. And it was quite uncanny when I went to the documents library and I opened up the document cases. I swear I could still smell Priestley's pipe smoke on the letters. And I went through the letters, and I was there for about 10 days, I think, a week, 10 days, something like that. And I went through the vast majority of them, and they're uncanny because they're an incredible snapshot of Britain in the early 1960s. And these are letters by ordinary people who've had extraordinary experiences. And some of the letters are many of them are absolutely extraordinary. And some of you will know that I've featured a number of these letters at the end of my book, Time and the Rose Garden, which was a book on JB Priestley. And the second third of the book is discussing the letters and everything else as well. But I've only ever done one presentation about the letters. And this was in a more general discussion that I did for the JB Priestley Society a few years ago. And I also did a general talk on it with JB Priestley's great-grandson, who is a good friend of mine, Luke Dodgson, and also Dr. Alan Roberts, who's an expert on Shakespeare. And we, three of us, spoke at the Bradford Literary Festival a few years ago. But other than that, I've never really discussed them. So I'll be discussing them this coming Saturday at the University of Bath. Now, some of the letters are just so weird and so strange, they are quite unbelievable. But what this circumstance reminded me of an amazing synchronicity that I'm just going to share with you guys now. Again, some of you will know about this and some of you will not. And it again features the book Man and Time. Now, when I was doing my original research for my first book, I discovered that Priestley had written a lot of subjects that were of interest to me. And I needed a copy of the book Man and Time. And at that time, I didn't have my own copy of the book. So I had to order a copy from the British Library and the British Library Document Store, which is in Bath Spa in Yorkshire. And of course, I needed to order that from my local library. And at that time, I was living in Horsham in West Sussex. So I made my way down to the library one afternoon and I register and I fill in the forms and I pay a small fee and they send off the paperwork up to Bath Spa. The people in Bath Spa then presumably receive the details, then go off into their vast stores of books when they have the time and they take the book out and then they pack it up and they send it back down to Horsham Library in West Sussex. All well and good. Anyway, a few weeks later, I get a phone call from Horsham Library and they turn around and they say, your book is in, your Man and Time is in. Would you like to come in and pick it up? Now, because at that time I was heavily writing the first book, Is There Life After Death, I couldn't get in for a couple of weekends. And I said, can I come in a few weeks' time? And they said, yes, of course, we'll hold it for you. So a few weeks later, I go in and I pick the book up. I then bring it back home and I left it in my study. 2 or 3 days later, I'm on my way to bed, and I don't know if you guys, I've always got to be reading something. I'm even somebody, I'll read the back of Weetabix packets and cereal packets because I just have to read if I don't have a book in my hand. And as I was going to bed, I thought, oh, I'll pick up the Man and Time book. And I took it to bed with me. And this is my own copy of the book. And it's got, so we can confirm here, the book has got 319 pages. Okay. And it's a big book. So it's 319 pages of this book. And I start flicking through the pages at random. And I mean, completely at random. I wasn't trying to read it. I was just looking through it. And as I was looking through it, I just sort of noticed something on page 91. And again, this is the image. And this is, by the way, I've posted this as well recently on YouTube, but I've been rather cryptic as to what I'm talking about in terms of this image. So a few people have picked it up and thought that I'm actually talking about time dilation and everything, and I'm not. Okay, so I randomly select this page and I'm lying in bed and I start reading it. And Priestley is talking about relativity and how curious relativity is in terms of time. And he decides, now he wrote this book in the early 1960s, and he decided to refer to a book, another book that had been written about 1957, 1958 by a British physicist called James A. Coleman. And Coleman had written a book called Relativity for the Layman. So here we have a whole series of poets of just chance occurrences to have me reading this that night. Okay. Now, first of all, you've got to say the randomness of me deciding to order the book, the randomness of when they sent the details off, the randomness of the British Library then deciding when they were going to send the book to me, the randomness of them phoning me, the Horsham Library, the randomness of what day I went in to pick it up, then the randomness of the day that I decided to pick the book up and read it one evening. Okay, so we got all these random things. Then we have to multiply that by the number of pages in the book. And I said, so there's 319 of them. So I could have looked at any one page of the 319, which then extrapolates off from all those other statistics that I've just been talking about. So I start reading down, and Priestley decides to refer to Coleman. So what he says is, this is clearly illustrated by a figure and an explanation based on it by James A. Coleman in his Relativity for the Layman. So I start reading it, and he said, this figure shows the Earth, the star Betelgeuse in the constellation Orion, the hunter, and Aldebaran in Taurus, the bull. Betelgeuse and Aldebaran are 352 light years respectively from the Earth. Also, Aldebaran is about 200 light years from Betelgeuse. Now, suppose there is a blowout on Orion on the night of March the 17th, 2000, caused by Betelgeuse exploding. This date and all the dates mentioned here refer to our method of keeping track of time on Earth. We on Earth would not see the blowout on that date, since Betelgeuse is 300 light years away, which means it would take 300 years for the light waves of the explosion to reach us. I'm lying in bed and turn around to my wife, Penny, and I say, what year is it? And she says, it's 2000. You know it's 2000. Because she has this strange way of looking at me when I do these things. And then I said, what month is it? And she said, it's March. And I said, what date is it? She said, the 17th. I said, what time of day is it? And she said, it's night time. So I then read out what Coleman had said on the night of March the 17th, 2000. Now, Coleman could have picked any date from the infinite past to the infinite future. He was writing it around 1957, 1958. So he chose 2000 at fairly random. I mean, clearly 2000 had significance in some way to people, you know, it was the turn of the millennium and everything. But in 1958, people weren't going to be thinking about that and that far advanced. Of that, I'm absolutely sure. So what are the chances of me, with all those random timings, picking up the book and then the hundreds of pages in the book to read that section, not only on the day, but the time of day that Coleman had randomly chosen? Now, remember, JB Priestley himself randomly chose the Coleman book in the first place. Now, according to Richard Wiseman, the incredibly wise Richard man, who clearly has an issue with parapsychology, has an issue with coincidences and everything else. He has this wonderful explanation of these things like synchronicities and everything else and precognitions. And he calls it the law of large numbers. What he argues is, for instance, that in any one night, we all micro dream. So we will have 10 or 15 separate dreams. You multiply that across a lifetime, that's a lot of dreams. Then you multiply it by the 4 or 5 billion people on Earth. There's an awful lot of dreams taking place at any one day. He therefore argues that therefore by the law of large numbers in any one day, it is not at all surprising that there might be an air crash that day, that somebody will have a dream featuring an air crash the day before. Yeah, I can see that. I agree. I can see that to an extent. But as an aside, there is a friend of mine, Jim Lewis, who had a dream of Concorde crashing with its tail on fire, full of German people, land crashing with at a particular time of the year, and he knew it was foreign. And a few months later, Concorde crashed. And of course, Concorde was the safest plane on the Earth. So Jim had that dream, but that dream was not just the law of large numbers. That wasn't a dream of an aircraft crashing. That was a dream of a specific aircraft crashing in a specific location with a particular group of people on board. Law of large numbers really doesn't explain that, does it? It seems more likely that precognition is real than the law of large numbers as an explanator for that. Now let's extrapolate that to my incident with the book Man and Time. All those variables, every single variable there was in tune to it. And it was that at the moment I realized that something strange was going on in the writing of that book. In some way, I was being guided in some way, in a very peculiar way. Now, there's an interesting coda to this, because the following weekend, myself and my wife went out to stay with my brother-in-law in Cheltenham. And my wife was getting quite fed up with this whole coincidence bit. And we were in an old-fashioned second-hand bookshop, which had piles of books here, there, and everywhere. It's completely random, and there was no rhyme nor reason to it. A typical, really nice second-hand bookshop. And she turns around to me and she says, okay, you're saying that you're being guided. You're saying that something is taking place here that's significant, and you're into coincidences and everything else. Let's try it out now. What book do you need at the moment? And I turned around to her and I said, I need a biography of William Blake, the poet and the painter. She went, oh my God. Right in her eye line, straight in front of her on the shelf, was a biography of William Blake. She threw it across the shop and stormed out, which is what skeptics do when they come across these things. It doesn't equate, so they just pretend it didn't happen. And this is what happens all the time. It's cognitive dissonance. You can't explain it because your science can't explain it, therefore it can't happen. There was evidence that it did. So there were two things there, both of which were very, very strange and very weird. And I'll be starting the discussion on Saturday on this. Now, I also want to talk about one or two other things before I shoot off, because this is only a short discussion. But I'm also letting you know in advance as well that there are also other events I'm going to be doing as well. Now, next week, if you bear with me a second, and I'll give you the exact details, is that I'll be giving the Parapsychological Association did a symposium in 2022, which was online. It was entitled High Strangeness and Parapsychology, Exploring the Deep Weird. Now, this is part of a book that myself and a group of associates of mine have contributed to, which has been edited by Dr. Jack Hunter, who is, I think Jack is still at the University of Chester. And Jack, by the way, will also be speaking, as I mentioned earlier, Jack will also be speaking at the University of Bath, the same event I'm doing over the weekend. But this particular event, we all did for the symposium, the group of the contributors, we all did a short presentation. for the symposium. This is now being released properly to the general public, and it will be going out on, just bear with me a second, and I'll give you the exact date. Hold on. Wednesday, September the 6th. So it's next Wednesday. And it will be starting at 4 p.m. British Summer Time. And it will go through until 9:30. And a group of us will be giving the recordings will be put out there so you can watch it online. But they're making it a networking event as well. So what will be happening at 4 o'clock, Jack Hunter will be talking about Deep Weird and about the book. And then at 4:55, there'll be a social event, which will be a one-to-one speed networking session, which I find quite interesting. You know, the idea of people who are interested in this thing actually doing a kind of weird speed dating. Then between 5:15 and 6:10, so 10 past 6, Mike Cleland will be talking about owls, synchronicity, and UFO contact, which is an area that I'm fascinated by the way, as well. Then between 6:10 and 6:40, there will be a social lounge break, again, where people can link in and chat with each other online and everything else as well, and you know, give the opportunity to find like-minded people, because that's one of the big problems we have, don't we, that we can never, you know, the rest of the world don't seem to get what we're at, so we have to seek each other people out as best we can. That will finish at 6:40. Then at 6:40 to 7:38, my good friend Samantha Lee Treasure will be talking about out-of-body experiences in the screen age. And this will be a section of her forthcoming book, which will be coming out next year, which will be published by Inner Traditions in America, and will be released in the UK as well. Then there will be 7:40 to 8 p.m, something wonderfully entitled Fluid Space Conversation. That sounds really fun. And then from 8 till 8:48, you will have my good self giving a talk on By Our Bootstraps, an egregorial model of reality, which is effectively me discussing the chapter I've contributed in the book, but also the background details to my book, The Hidden Universe, which I wrote or was published in 2019. So try and get along for that. I will put up a link to it when I've posted this permanently on my YouTube channel, and I'll put a link. And also, if you want to check, the link is already there on my my Facebook, Tony Anthony Peake Facebook site. So it's clickable there, and you can join us there. And it'll be wonderful if you can join in. I won't be there later in the afternoon, but I will try and get there for the first hour or so, and listen in and join in if I can. So that's what I'll be doing then. Then in terms of, and all of you will know, we had problems with, well, I had problems with my Zoom. I think I've now fixed it. This is why I'm doing this quick introduction now, is to see if it works properly now. I've reinvested in some new software and everything else as well, and some new hardware. So I'm hoping that it'll be working perfectly. In terms of this, our next guest on Consciousness Hour will be on the 10th of September, which again will be going out live on this channel. And my guest, or Sarah and I's guest, will be a fascinating musician called Dean Johnson. Now, I've known of Dean Johnson for many, many years. He's based in Liverpool. And you know that what I'm trying to do with Consciousness Hour is there's another thread running through it, as well as extraordinary experiences and also academics doing research in these areas. My other great love is music. And over the years, I regularly invite musicians to talk about their career and anecdotal talks about meetings they've had with musicians and things around the world. And Dean has played with virtually all of them. It's extraordinary. His pedigree is incredible. And we're going to have a really nice long chat about music. Then we have on the 8th, on Consciousness Hour, my guest will be Adam Butler. Now, Adam is a researcher into DMT entities and DMT experiences. His book is extraordinary, his writing is extraordinary, and he's a fan of my work, and I'm a great fan of his as well. And we have similar ideas about the roles of what these entities are when they come through in DMT experiences. And of course, this is the term I call them egregorials. So we're going to be talking about his book and talking about that in some detail. And then going through then, I think that is it for the moment, but I've got 2 or 3 people. We need to get back Eric Wargo, the writer on time, who joined us, or we tried to join him last week, but that failed. But hopefully if this goes out, we'll get Eric back as well in the next few weeks. I've also got 4 or 5 other guests lined up, but at the moment we're just trying to get the timings together for that. Also, if anybody is interested and is likely to be in California next June, I'm delighted to say I've been invited back to speak at Contact in the Desert in Indian Wells in Southern California. As many of you will know, I spoke reasonably successfully, I think, from the fact that they want me back this summer in June. And I've been invited back, and I've already decided the subject matter I'm going to be talking on. And one of the ones I'll be doing an intensive 3-hour workshop on the lifetimes, writings, novels, and everything else of Philip K. Dick. And I'm hoping that because Philip K. Dick lived in Southern California, I'm hoping I'll be able to invite 1 or 2 people who may have knew the great guy, if that is possible, to see if I can get them along to do my talk as well. So anyway, everybody, that is it for now. Thanks for listening in. And please try and get along to some of these events if you can. Also, I will be speaking next year. Also, it's way in advance now, but I'll also be speaking in Essex, in Southend-on-Sea, and I'll also be joining Sarah, my assistant, for the Consciousness Hour, because Sarah's doing this absolutely extraordinary event in October. In October, let's just find out. Again, check my dates on here. No, in fact, yeah, it's October. On October the 11th, I'll be joining Sarah, and I'll be giving an online discussion and talk on cheating the ferryman for the people who will be going along to Sarah's Greek event. The main Greek event itself will be taking place from, I think it's the 21st or the 22nd to the 27th, I think, of October in Athens. So if you fancy a late summer break in one of my favorite cities in the world, get along to Sarah's event. We are hoping that if it's going to be successful, that it will be done again next year, next October. And I have said to Sarah that I will speak at it, which is really good. It's also being supported by Cactus Books, who are my Greek language publishers as well. So that's really good. So there's lots of links here as well. So there are a series of events. There's more and more coming through all the time, and I'll keep you briefed on those. But that's all for now. So thanks for listening in, and take care of yourself.